Good evening. We are live from Israel, where through the week we have been reporting from the epicenter of the war zone as Israel seeks to retaliate against the Hamas terror attack. I'm Barkha Dutt, you're with the Mojo story. As American President Joe Biden touched down in Tel Aviv earlier today, the world had already woken up to the horrific images of a hospital in Gaza being bombed. The day began with Gazans blaming the Israeli Air Force and the Israeli military for dropping bombs on a Gaza hospital in which more than 500 people were killed. But by the time the day ended, the Americans at least had backed Israel's account of what had happened. In fact, President Biden told media that the Americans had made their own assessment and the data he had seen made him believe that it was, quote unquote, the other team. He meant, of course, the Islamic Jihad that the Israelis have blamed that were responsible for that horrific attack that included taking the lives of women and children. However, what's really important is President Biden's remarks made a short while ago. He warned Israel that while America stood with Israel, Israel should not make the mistakes that the United States made in rage after 9/11. Welcome to this special broadcast, live from the war zone. Let me introduce our guest of the program today, and then I'll play out that horrible video in case you had missed it today. Joining us is military veteran from India, General Rakesh Sharma. A pleasure to have you on the program with us. Also joining us from the United States today is Jonah. Jonah, of course, has in an earlier avatar worked with Joe Biden and is a very well-known foreign policy expert and former advisor to Biden. Good to see you, Jonah, after a while. Also joining us is strategic affairs expert Kartha. Welcome to the program, ma'am. And finally joining us here in Israel is Alexander Grinberg. He has been a former IDF intelligence officer. Welcome, everybody, to the program. Let me start, just for anybody who may have missed these horrible images today, the moment when bombs dropped at that Gaza hospital, shocking the world and potentially some thought changing the discourse around Israel's retaliation, at least when the day started.
يا الله يا الله يا الله مستشفى انجليزي مستشفى انجليزي يا رب الحمد لله يا رب.
Really terrible images made worse by the fact that moments before there were images of children playing at that very hospital site. If we can play those images, children playing, helping to clean up the hospital premises. And we discovered later that the videographer that had taken these images at the Baptist hospital in Gaza was killed as well. The day began with many believing that the discourse would shift, but by the end of the day, the IDF had placed a lot of evidence that in the public domain that they said was conclusive proof that it was a misfired rocket by the Islamic Jihad that was responsible for what had happened. Before I actually come to President Biden's comments, I just want to get first responses from our guest today. Alex, I'll start with you. The Gaza hospital bombing, absolutely horrific. A lot of people felt that in this he said versus he said battle, we were in the fog of war. Are you worried as you see the massive carnage that has taken place at this hospital that it could take away from global sort of solidarity with Israel, or do you believe enough evidence has been placed in the public domain? Alexander.
First of all, I must say I don't really care. After what happened in Israel, that 1,000 to 300 Israeli citizens, women, children, men were butchered and slaughtered. And when I see on all the Arabic channels in Gaza and across the Arab world, crowds of people who enjoying to mutilate bodies, to torture, to burn women, and to kill, there is no such thing as innocent people in Gaza, and it doesn't exist.
Explain
the term
that. Explain that. Those little children at the hospital, they don't have a political opinion on Hamas.
No, okay, there's no such a term innocent in juridical military terminology. There is a term non-involved. To call these crowds non-involved, it's too much. That's the first thing. Second thing, it's war. So those who opened the floods of hell, so they bring disaster to their people. I remind you that Germany was won by the Soviet army, who raped half Germany, and the British Air Force, who burned half Germany. I don't support rape, but this is what happened. It's not that Germany repented. And when the Americans and the Brits and the French liberated, between the brackets, Mosul, whereas the Muslims of Mosul never asked them to liberate them from Daesh, so they brought heavy artillery, and it was done. No one asked the questions. The question about innocence is about only when it is about Jews.
The question of innocence is only when it's about Jews. I was going to actually jump in to say that we didn't have the greatest connection to you, but your rage was enough to come through the airwaves in any case. You said you don't care. There's nobody innocent in Gaza. And that is, in a way, reflective of much of the rage on the street here in Israel, where the Gazans are seen as having created and backed, not created, but certainly having backed the Hamas in large numbers. That said, the IDF, your former agency, was at pains today to say that they did care and that they did not target the hospital, and that they released an intercept that they said was between two Hamas operatives. I'm just going to play that and then also get reactions to the very, very angry words that we've just heard from Alex. But let's listen to what the IDF says is intercepts that conclusively prove that those rockets were actually misfired and belong to the Islamic Jihad.
I want to give you an announcement of the event that occurred in the hospital in Gaza. I can confirm that an analysis of the IDF operational systems indicates that a barrage of rockets was fired by terrorists in Gaza, passing in close proximity to the Al-Hali al-Ma'adi hospital in Gaza at the time it was hit. Intelligence from few sources that we have in our hands indicates that the Islamic Jihad is responsible for the failed rocket launch which hit the hospital in Gaza. I repeat, this is the responsibility of Islamic Jihad that killed innocents in the hospital in Gaza.
Now, that was the IDF saying that that this is the job of the Islamic Jihad, and I really wanted us to also hear those intercepts. Can we play the intercepts of the two Hamas operatives where the IDF claims that the conversation actually shows that this is the work of the Islamic Jihad? Can we please play those intercepts?
بس بقول لك أول مرة نشوف الصاروخ زي هيك والشظايا هذه، فبقول لك تبع الجهاد، صواريخ الجهاد الإسلامي هاي.
ايه
فهم بقول لك عون الجهاد الإسلامي.
انه من عندنا هذا
شكله من عندنا.
مين اللي بيقول هيك؟
بيحكوا إنه الشظايا تبعت الصاروخ إنه الشظايا محلية مش زي شظايا.
ايش بتقول؟ سبحان الله، من عندنا ما لقاش غيرين بجرثومية.
عاد هذول تلاقيهم من المقبرة الورا دي بفلك محط فيهم. ايش الأجدر؟ بتلاقيهم طالعين من المقبرة اللي ورا المستشفى المعمداني دي اللي هو فسه ونزل عندهم.
هو في مقبرة وراه؟
المعمداني ولك عند الساحة بالضبط.
هي وين لما تدخل على الساحة؟
أول ما تدخل على الساحة تدخلش على البلد، على ايدك اليمين في مستشفى المعمداني.
عرفتها.
So those are intercepts that the IDF released allegedly between Hamas operatives. Jonah, I want to bring you in. You heard Alex very angry saying 1,300 Israeli civilians died. There were children among them. I was just at a protest by families of men, women and children who've been taken hostages. And I understand his anger. The youngest hostage is 9 months old. But at the same time, there have also been heartbreaking images out of Gaza. A small child, for example, an image that's gone viral, trembling with fear as he sees bombs fall all around them, literally shaking after he survived the Gaza hospital bombing. Now, the point is that when President Biden left for Israel, he seemed very, very concerned that maybe this was an Israeli airstrike. By the end of the day, he was backing the Israelis. His exact words were, I believe the other team did it. Yet, Jordan, the meetings with Jordan and Egypt could not happen. With the whole attempt by the Americans to try and prevail for a humanitarian corridor, that did not happen because of this hospital bombing. When you listen to Alex and also when you listen to President Biden's statements, what would you say?
Yes, Barkha. First, I think it is important to recognize and validate the anger because it is legitimate. But second, I think that President Biden is quite correct to remind Israelis not to repeat the mistakes that we, the United States, made after 9/11. I was working for him at the time, and I remember the intense anger that so many people, so many Americans felt. And without that intense anger, we might not have been we might not have fallen into the terrible errors that we made in Iraq and Afghanistan. Errors that both took innocent lives in both nations and also the many lives of Americans as well, because there are always innocent civilians in a war zone.
So you don't agree with Alex that there's no such thing as an innocent civilian?
That's quite correct. I do not. I think there are innocent Israelis, there are innocent Palestinians. I would say that most Israelis are not responsible for the actions of their government. Most Palestinians are not responsible for the actions of Hamas. All civilians, it's a basic tenet of war that all civilians must be treated as non-combatants. That doesn't mean that civilians will never be killed or injured. It does mean that every nation, and Israel's army agrees with this and supports this, every army must do its level best to avoid treating civilians as the targets of attack.
Right. Before I actually come to both General Sharma and Tara, and of course, Alex, I don't think any of us meant to not validate your rage, but you heard a very different perspective from Jonah. I want to play out President Biden's remarks, in particular those remarks where he warns Israel to not act from rage, acknowledging that America has done the same and walked into multiple traps, suggesting that Israel might be about to do the same. Let's listen to President Biden's remarks.
And later this week, I'm going to ask the United States Congress for an unprecedented support package for Israel's defense. We're going to keep Iron Dome fully supplied so it can continue standing sentinel over Israeli skies, saving Israeli lives. We've moved U.S. military assets to the region, including positioning the USS Ford Carrier Strike Group in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the USS Eisenhower on the way to defer further aggression against Israel and to prevent this conflict from spreading. The world will know that Israel is stronger than ever. And my message to any state or any other hostile actor thinking about attacking Israel remains the same as it was a week ago. Don't. Since this terrorist attack took place, we've seen it described as Israel's 9/11. But for a nation the size of Israel, it was like 15 9/11s. The scale may be different, but I'm sure those horrors have tapped into some kind of primal feeling in Israel, just like it did and felt in the United States. Shock, pain, rage, an all-consuming rage. I understand, and many Americans understand. You can't look at what has happened here to your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, sons, daughters, children, even babies, and not scream out for justice. Justice must be done. But I caution this: while you feel that rage, don't be consumed by it. After 9/11, we were enraged in the United States. While we sought justice and got justice, we also made mistakes. I'm the first U.S. president to visit Israel in time of war. I've made wartime decisions. I know the choices are never clear or easy for the leadership. There's always cost, but it requires being deliberate. It requires asking very hard questions. It requires clarity about the objectives and an honest assessment about whether the path you're on will achieve those objectives. The vast majority of Palestinians are not Hamas. Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people. Hamas uses innocent families in Gaza as human shields, putting their command centers, their weapons, their communications tunnels in residential areas. Palestinian people are suffering greatly as well. We mourn the loss of innocent Palestinian lives like the entire world. I was outraged and saddened by the enormous loss of life yesterday in the hospital in Gaza. Based on the information we've seen to date, it appears the result of an errant rocket fired by a terrorist group in Gaza. The United States unequivocally stands for the protection of civilian life during conflict, and I truly grieve for the families who were killed or wounded by this tragedy. The people of Gaza need food, water, medicine, shelter. Today, I asked the Israeli cabinet, who I met with for some time this morning, to agree to the delivery of life-saving humanitarian assistance to civilians in Gaza.
Right. I want reactions to those comments. General Sharma, I'll start with you. The warning to not repeat the mistakes of the United States of America leapt out at me from everything else he said. Of course, he expressed complete solidarity with Israel. He also met with survivors and victims of the Hamas terror attack. But what did you make of that, General Sharma?
Yeah, Barkha, you have to say it again. I missed the call in between.
What did you make of President Biden's warning to not repeat America's mistakes?
Yeah, so Barkha, thank you for inviting me. Firstly, that 7th October, what happened was horrific. It was barbaric. It was most unlike anything we have seen in our lifetimes, and one feels for the people of Israel. And having said so, there is President Biden's remarks come also because we have seen the Americans also using horrific force. They had used force in Fallujah many times, in Mosul, in Afghanistan. We've also seen Russians using in Georgia or in Sumy in Ukraine. And this kind of force doesn't actually help. While the anger is there, the psyche has been hurt, the national ferociousness is around because of what has happened. But, there has to be some kind of control also. I'm not saying that there is supposed to be a proportionate response, but, a baby who's of Jew origin or a baby who's a Palestinian origin is just the same. He is a baby. You cannot handle it in a manner different than what the terrorist organization has been doing. If we follow the same hammer which the terrorist organizations are doing, then that's being as nasty. So, while we have to, the Israel has to act against the Hamas, but it doesn't mean that 2.5 million people staying in West Bank are all, in Gaza Strip are all, people who deserve to be punished. If you tell any part of India that 1.1 million people to vacate within 24 hours and go away somewhere else, there will be mass protests in the country. That's actually how do you execute a thing like this in a strip which is called packed up like men there? So men and women. So you just can't say 24 hours you vacate because we'll be coming in. That's actually being exceedingly harsh. So while the anger is justified, the action is justified, a response is justified, but there has to be a measure of what to do it. And I finish with one thing, Barkha. It's not important to say whose rocket fell in the school, in the hospital. Because we know that truth is the first casualty in any war. Because both sides will come up with a whole lot of conjectures and a whole lot of information warfare videos made out and sound bites and all that. It's the belief, it's the impression that people carry that this came from. So a whole lot of Arab world will say no, it has come from Israel. It's the belief part of it because they know nobody is telling the truth or nobody can tell the truth. So the fact is that you have to be exceedingly cautious because this incident will happen many times hereafter. Many other places, schools will be hit. There'll be people packed up in some buildings will be hit. So every time you can't keep saying, so we didn't do it, somebody else did it, and we have a video to show or we are recording to show. It can't happen like that. There has to be a caution in what has to be done.
Okay, Tara, I want you to come in. I think General Sharma is talking about not just the fog of war, but also the battle for narrative. And a lot of Israelis, they're very furious about this. And they say, as you heard Alex saying, that there is an anti-Semitic sort of sentiment at the heart of it. But General Sharma makes the point that things are much more complex, that Israel, for its own sake, needs to care about that perception. What do you say, Tara?
I will see it as a purely counter-terrorism strategy, Barkha, because that's where I come from. In counter-terrorism, the rage of Israel is entirely understandable, where they're coming from, the whole history, what brought up Israel, the way they've been hounded over centuries. I mean, I get the rage. But a military mind doesn't think like that. A military mind should think in terms of operations. And when you get the Palestinians, when you treat them like this, you are multiplying the war. You're multiplying the anger against you all across. And second is, it's unwinnable. You cannot do this, as General Sharma said, in terms of a strategy. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I mean, surely the Israelis I know are one of the best among the world in terms of intelligence. They're amazing. Don't you know where the Hamas terrorists are hiding? I mean, I know it's easy for me to sit here and say so, right? But these are the poor people on the ground who are forced to act. But I am so struck by President Biden's words. I mean, this is a president who knows his stuff. He's saying, don't react in anger. And it is not the job of the military to react in anger. The politicians will, not the military. So I'm a little puzzled by this whole thing. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I.
Let me bring in Jonah, and then I'll come back to Alex. Jonah, what is the consensus, if there is one? What is the Washington consensus? And I'm not talking about outliers and extreme voices that have called this a religious war. I'm just talking about the bipartisan consensus. What is that consensus today?
Well, Barkha, I'm not sure that there is a very clear consensus. On the Republican side of the aisle, there is a lot of rhetoric that seems to be for domestic political consumption. On the Democratic side, there is, I think, a broader consensus that this that the terrorism inflicted by Hamas is inexcusable and cannot be it cannot be mitigated in any way, shape, or form. However, that's only the first part of the conversation, because what does Israel do after it moves into Gaza? I think there is a widespread consensus on support for Israel's right to essentially terminate the threat from Hamas, but that's where the consensus breaks down, because the really important question is what happens to the civilians and what happens after
Can
Israel occupies.
Can I ask you? Sorry to interrupt you, but President Biden's tweet said, as a friend, he asked Netanyahu tough questions. What are some of those tough questions you think?
I suspect that they would concern what happens next, because as the U.S. learned in Afghanistan and in Iraq, usually the invasion, for a militarily superior power, the invasion's the easy part. The difficult part is what happens next. For the Israelis, even the invasion won't be easy. This will be a fiendishly difficult invasion, but the really big question is what happens next? What happens after Hamas is destroyed at great cost to both sides? And Israel is going to have to figure a lot of that out before rather than after, if it's going to avoid some of the mistakes that the United States made, particularly in Iraq.
Yes, let me take that to Alex. Alex, again, it's not that any one of us do not get the anger. Indians in particular have been victims of terrorism, I think, for as long as I can remember. I've had memories of bombs going off in cities in the Kashmir Valley. We know this. We know this reality. We feel this. We feel what you feel. My question to you is, what did you feel about President Biden's warning to not repeat the mistakes of 9/11 that the Americans did? There was a mea culpa in that comment. We, the United States, made mistakes. We acted from rage. Don't act from rage. What would you say to that?
Well, first I correct myself. It never said there are no such thing as innocent civilians, but it's about normal war. In this specific case, and I will never let anyone to divert from the issue is that 100, 300 innocent, really innocent citizens of Israel were butchered on their territory, okay? If we talk about treating the civilians, okay, please explain it to Hamas. If Hamas, the IDF did not argue that it was a jihad rocket, and the IDF presented evidence that it was a jihad rocket. The second thing, if someone targets, of course, no one talks about targeting intentionally citizens. If a rocket is fired on our sovereign territory, on our citizens, so the fire must be shot. Third, I don't care about, again, strategy. It's too much. We're not talking about a botched operation or something, a successful strategy. We were said that the Palestinians wanted peace and we should treat them gently. So then when beforehand we were said we should withdraw with Gaza and we'll be okay. So we withdrew with Gaza, we got missiles upon the advice of Condi Rice, that enforced on us and the Palestinian Authority elections in Gaza. So we got Hamas in Gaza. And now, okay, so we're not America, we're a tiny state, and my grandfamily in Russia underwent the Holocaust in Ukraine. They were also butchered by Germans or by the Ukrainians, I don't know who exactly, okay? And the world didn't care. We have the army, and anyone who threatens to kill me and my family will die. That's all. Get it. We're not in Afghanistan, thousands of kilometers from country. We're not trying to bring democracy or something. And then America can afford mistakes. We cannot afford mistakes. My only will is not to be butchered by Hamas. You're right that will be a difficult question, what will be after in Gaza after that. But for the moment, there is the first task is to eliminate any threat from Gaza, because we're talking about abandoning of the country's south by farmers, by all these people. No life can be restituted before the threat from Gaza is eliminated completely.
Right. Can I ask you therefore, Alex, given what you feel, would it be fair to say that there is no chance that this de-escalates without the Israeli military going into Gaza? Because
of course it de-escalates. Of course it escalates more. Of course.
Or it escalates.
But again, we're not talking. There are plenty of tunnels. There is Iran Hezbollah. But again, it's not a normal case that you can just prevent an escalation because two leaders may make mistakes and no one really wants to work. It's a situation that no normal country can afford and suffer. That's all.
Okay, I want General Sharma. We just lost him on camera. Tara, you felt that Alex and Israel might be acting from emotion. Alex says, no, we're not. We're small. We can't afford to do
sorry, sometimes acting on emotion, outrage is the rational behavior. It's already a social construct that acting outrage is not smart. It's not always smart.
Yeah, I have to say, I understand what you're saying, and I want Tara to respond that rage is not negative. Sometimes the emotion is the visceral response of a nation. We struggled with this after 26/11, so we kind of know this debate. Go ahead, Tara.
No, rage can be turned into a positive thing. I mean, you have a rage against a terrorist attack, you want to do something about it. That is, Hamas has to be eliminated. I mean, there's no two ways on that, right? This is a horrible, terrible organization which is fundamental, their own fundamentals are terrible. There's no two ways on that. My point is different. My point is rage doesn't get you far on the ground. In terms of military operations, in terms of counterterrorism operations, as the other gentleman said, going in is the easy part, right? So even in the sense, I am like, even now, if you look on Twitter, nobody is believing the Israelis. That the attack on the hospital was by Islamic Jihad. It's already, there's a flood of tweets. So this is going to spread. Now we can say, I don't care what anybody says. In a way, that's true because it's your country, right? Why should you care? But then in military terms, you have to think about this, which is why
I think Alex wants to respond briefly to you, and then I'll let you complete your point. Alex?
Look, okay, I speak fluent Arabic and other languages, so I don't really care about these pathology. That's no one likes Israel and no one believes in Israel. Okay, most, if you look at Arab internet, if you read in Urdu in Pakistan, so you'll see that no one believes Israel and that no one believes that the Holocaust ever existed, or that this massacre took place. So I really don't care. And all these people who rejoice about the massacre of Israel must understand that this time is over. The time when IDF and Air Force made hundreds of sorties of Gaza that no army in the world even tried to do, it is over. If someone tries to attack you, and if we are in danger, we'll burn the Middle East. You hear what I say, what you really hear.
So
It is true.
let me ask this to all right, General Sharma's kind of flipped upside down, but there you are. If you can hear me, General Sharma, let me ask this from Israel's perspective. The Israelis would say, if you expect us not to go into Gaza, what do you expect us to do? What should we do at this point? What are the options that you list for us that you believe are kosher? General Sharma?
So the fact is, see, the pain and anguish is there. And but what has been Israel doing for last 16 years by blockading Gaza? Has last 16 years helped in any way to say it brought about peace here? 20,000 people were being permitted to come from Gaza every day to work in Israel. Did that help? No, it didn't help. This is the first time that the Hamas used a kind of hammer. And also, after using that hammer and badly used it, they did not follow up. There was no other thing done. So there is no follow-up operation carried out by the Hamas. So they just wanted to do one act and get on with it and made life because they wanted to because Palestine as an issue was being marginalized and they wanted to bring it to the fore and the window was being closed because there is so much happening on power politics in West Asia, and I2, U2, and
General Sharma, how would we as
yes.
Indians feel if the Hizbul Mujahideen or the Lashkar-e-Taiba or the Jaish-e-Mohammed said, oh, nobody talks about Kashmir after 370, let's go in, let's kill 40 soldiers, let's bring the world's attention on Kashmir? We would be livid, our blood would boil, we would be furious. We need to acknowledge that sentiment first.
Exactly. So I said the pain and the anguish and the national psyche and the international psyche is all understandable. What you are saying exactly what I'm saying. There is a pain, there is an anguish, but make a plan for it. You just cannot go in and kill, say, now they are saying 3,000, 4,000, but if you have another 10,000 being killed, would it help the cause of, at least it will bring the anger out. It will bring you get relieved of the pain that you're feeling of what happened on 7th of October. But it will not bring peace across to you because it will cause more and more trouble. Every family will produce two more terrorists hereafter. And it is not any one quality. Once the American journal said in Afghanistan that when you kill a terrorist and it produces two more which come out of that same family, well, you have lost the war. You can't allow a situation to go that it becomes more problematic for you. So this situation is coming up. Then now there is, sorry, I'll end here. 60% unemployment in the ages of 15 to 29 in Gaza. You don't even know which man is Hamas. There will be every man who you see in the streets is Hamas. Who would you kill? Who are you killing? Are you killing Hamas?
But
You can't find out. You can't differentiate
it's
people.
also important, Jonah, to mention at this point that this evening I spent time with families of those whose loved ones are in captivity of the Hamas. And the Hamas has also released videos, classic psyops, showing a young woman, 21-year-old Mia Shem, in captivity. There's also all of this going on. There you see those images, right? And while the Gaza hospital bombing is horrific, so is this. And the point is, how does one break this cycle of competitive grief? And I think the question that Israelis would ask is, all right, what is considered a proportional response at this point? And what would you say to that, Jonah?
Are you asking me, Barkha?
No, Jonah first. Jonah.
Okay, fine.
Jonah.
Yes.
Fine.
Yeah.
Yes, Barkha, you're right. And I think you asked earlier about consensus. In the US, there is almost complete consensus of utter disgust, utter revulsion, utter rejection of Hamas's terrorism, both to the butchery it inflicted on October 7th and its taking of hostages and still holding of hostages today. On that, there is essentially nobody outside of that consensus, and nobody saying that Israel should not protect its citizens and should not destroy Hamas. There you get very little pushback. The only area where people do diverge is how you do this. And that gets to your point of what happens next. There you've got a lot of different opinions because, as General Sharma has quite rightly said, there's a difference between the justified rage that Israelis are feeling today, that Americans were feeling after 9/11, that Indians were feeling after the Mumbai attacks. All of that is completely justified. But then how do you make your decisions? What is the next step that you take? And as General Sharma has quite rightly said, you cannot simply move 2 million people in 24 hours. It's a logistical impossibility. So what is the next step? That's the only area on which I think President Biden is taking Bibi Netanyahu quietly behind the scenes and saying, look, I share your rage. I urge you not to make your decisions based on rage, but to think through what the result will be.
Yeah. So now, before I get final comments from all of you, I've been spending some time actually near the Gaza border. We were able to, in the last 24 hours, go 1 mile from the Gaza Strip, which has now become the front line of the planned the ground assault into and on Gaza. And talking about rockets and explosions, there are rockets and explosions literally every 10 minutes at the front line. Some of it is rockets coming in from Gaza, and some of it is mortar fire being returned by the Israelis. And just to get you a sense of what's happening right at the front line of this battle, it is not showing any signs of de-escalating. In fact, I would say we're at an escalatory inflection point in this conflict. And I just want to play out this report and then come back to you for last comments. So just to show you how close we are to the front line of the war, these are the rockets that have come in from the Gaza Strip just moments ago, even while we were inside the kibbutz Be'eri, and we heard, I don't know, so many explosions, more than 20. And here our guide Eli is showing us another part of a rocket that has fallen. What are we seeing here?
This is part of the rocket that they're reviving here, destroy the cars that they're parking here in the party. Yeah. And also this one. This is from this last week.
And we're just about a mile from the Gaza Strip, right?
Yeah, Gaza Strip, when you've been with
that side, yeah. But we're very close, and they've been targeting, as you can see, from the rockets that have been falling here. And you just heard an explosion. Even as I'm standing here, you can hear the explosions. And these are rockets. Look up. Boom. And there, you can see that. You can see the rocket there, right there in the sky, the trail of smoke. If the camera turns around here, let me show you where we are. We are just outside the kibbutz Be'eri, and we just heard
the Iron Dome
explosions go off in the Iron Dome.
The Iron Dome. Another one over there.
The Iron Dome is intercepting the rockets that are coming from Gaza.
The rocket coming from Gaza. Another one. Bam.
There, I can see that right in the sky. So we've been talking about these explosions while we've been here at the kibbutz Be'eri. And if the camera comes down, again, I'm going to tell you that we're standing at one of the worst massacre sites. And if the camera pans up to the sky, you can now hear the Iron Dome. You can see those little plumes of smoke in the sky, intercepting the rockets everywhere. And here, let me show you, through the sound of explosions, can the camera please follow me here? You can see parts of the rocket that have fallen right where we were standing. And once again, let the camera move up. Ellie, we're seeing the sky filled with these white plumes. Tell us what we're seeing. You counting?
Everything. If you have 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
That they attack the missiles that you have one like that downstairs here.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the good jobs of the Iron Dome.
Yeah, the good job of the Iron Dome, Israel's famed Iron Dome, intercepting those rockets from Gaza, but some have fallen here. Let me leave you with this image to give you a sense of how close we are to the war front. Just about a mile, the officer said, from the Gaza Strip, and the explosions literally every few minutes, signaling the beginning of a war offensive. Signaling the beginning of a war offensive was my impression from spending time the last few days at the edge of that, the kibbutz Be'eri, which has now become a frontline area, and you literally hear more explosions than you can count. I want to get last comments on what might happen next, what should happen next, what could happen next. General Sharma, I'll start with you.
So firstly, I think there is a need for creating a buffer to push the mortar fire, the fires that are coming close from the borders across to the kibbutz across there on own side, at least push that fire away. and that needs to be done in a pronto manner. We can't keep having people being hit. Second issue is that we have to control West Bank. Now, some of the news say there are 54 casualties in the West Bank in the first 1 week after 7th of October. If West Bank breaks up, because there are Hamas people in West Bank also, which are not registered, they are incommunicado, but they exist in West Bank. If it also has another intifada, then the whole region will be in conflagration. So there needs to be a control as what's going to happen into West Bank. 60% of the West Bank territory is controlled by Israel because it is those settlements. So we need to be very cautious on West Bank. There will be great trouble if both, and if Hezbollah also takes off, then the whole area will be in conflagration. We need to retain the control of the operations into Gaza and in a manner which has to be pinpointed to house as it's being carried out. It is not ad lib. There will be more problems if it is taken in a very dramatic way. The anguish can never go away. This event will change the history of the region for times to come. Military historians and social scientists will write about this event of 7th October for decades to find out what happened. But that doesn't mean that the aftermath also gets been studied in the same manner. There has to be some kind of proportionality to come into it. This can't go on like this for too long a time.
Well, you mentioned the protests, and actually, the entire Arab world saw protests. You had Turkey sort of up in arms. You had the Israeli embassy in Amman, Jordan, being stormed, and you've had eruptions of protests in the West Bank, General Sharma, that you were just actually speaking of. Alex, let me bring you in. How does this end according to you? Because obviously Biden is warning against a new occupation of Gaza. Israel has not said that is its intention. Israel has said the intention is to dismantle Hamas. How does this end? And when or where does it end?
Well, that's the thing I really don't know. I know that if Israel embarks on a ground operation, it will be very much blood, sweat, and tears. But as I'm Israeli, I live among my people. There is a unity among all the people of Israel, irrespectively of the backgrounds or political opinions, that we will do war and we will fight. And we know it will claim lives of I don't know how many soldiers. But again, we're not fighting for peace. We're not thinking strategy. They're monsters, ogres who hold our women and children captured on our territory. And if either they surrender or they will die. Even if, and again, when it's absolute evil that must be eradicated, just as during the Second World War, let's first win and surrender the Nazis, and afterwards let's think about what we do in Gaza. I have no intention to occupy Gaza or to remain in them, but even if it happens, there's no other possibility to, except for magic possibilities that we don't have, to eradicate Hamas without conquering Gaza, and it will be Egypt or other countries who will pay for that, not us.
Okay, Tara, you said that Alex was speaking from rage and emotion. But to his question, how do you dismantle Hamas if you don't go into Gaza? What would you say?
I think he has a point, because you can't, after such an act of terror, you can't possibly an Israeli defense which sits at home and says, okay, let me think about what to do, is going to have the people enraged. Like, it's like what is the Israel Defense Forces for? But then to that, I would say I'm not sure what his win is. Are you going to eradicate every single Hamas? It's not possible. Because, like you said, if you kill 10 Hamas, you will have 10 more. So, victory in this scenario is unclear. So, ideally, since it's not just the protests that you mentioned, there are protests in Europe, there are protests in India. This thing has gone like a wildfire across, which is precisely what Hamas wants.
Yeah.
The only way to do is just to now freeze and have some international Chinese envoys around, ironically, Maybe get them to release the hostages and freeze this as of now. It's not an ideal solution. And if Israel can help the people in Gaza to get their, the rations and food they need, that is where your victory lies.
Yeah.
It's very unpleasant to hear, but your victory lies in making sure that those people don't suffer.
So I just want to actually read out a statement from Netanyahu's office after his talks with President Biden, and then I'll give Jonah the last word. It says that Israel, these are the three decisions after these talks, Israel will not allow any humanitarian assistance from its territory to the Gaza Strip as long as our captives are not returned. I'm just reading this out. This is Netanyahu's statement. Israel demands Red Cross visits with our captives and is working to mobilize broad international support for this demand. And in light of President Biden's request, Israel will not prevent humanitarian assistance from Egypt as long as it is food, water, and medicine for the civilian population in the south of the Gaza Strip to which it is evacuating, as long as these supplies do not reach Hamas. Any supplies that reach Hamas will be prevented. Now, here's my question, Jonah. Nothing moves from Israel into Gaza. It can move from Egypt into the southern tip. But if the Israelis believe it's going to Hamas, it will be stopped, i.e. with force. Hamas could be using civilians as human shields. Hamas could be mixed up with the civilian population. What are we looking ahead in the next few days? And what do you hope we're looking ahead at the next few days?
Well, what I'm expecting in the next few days and the next few weeks is an Israeli ground invasion. And from the U.S. perspective, there are very few voices in the U.S. that are even counseling against this. President Biden is certainly not counseling against it. There are even the voices urging a humanitarian pause are not saying that Israel should not go in with a ground offensive to terminate Hamas. The real question is what happens during that. Is Israel going to follow the rules of war, which is what President Biden has strongly urged that it do? And what happens after that? What is the long-term plan? Are the 2 million people of Gaza going to be dispossessed? Are they going to be forced to permanently live in the south? Will the northern part of Gaza become a de facto no man's zone? These are things that will have to be sorted out after the next few days, after the next few weeks.
Yeah, and the images you were seeing on your screen are tanks and infantry that have lined up at the edge. I don't think there's going to be any stepping back from that ground assault. It is going to be a grim, volatile, and tense few days, not just for Israel, but for the region. And remember, there's the north of Israel where the Hezbollah is also engaging with the military. There's Iran making all kinds of threats. So we literally do not know what's going to happen next. We're in a very, very precarious position, and one that will impact not just the entire region, but the entire world. We thank everybody for their time today. We'll continue to be on the ground reporting from the war zone. Thank you, General Sharma, Kartha, Jonah Blank, and to Alexander. Thank you very much for your time today. And to our audience, thank you for watching. Take care. See you tomorrow.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Watch Her Story and support independent, robust journalism.